We're all good.
Hello and welcome back to the Franchise Growth Pod. My name is Belle, Director of Marketing at AC Inc., and I am here today with Mr. Roger Peterson, one of our amazing franchise growth advisors. How's it going, Roger?
Good morning, Belle. It's going fantastic as usual. Just another, I'll say, sunny day in Ontario. So all
Amazing,
good.
amazing. If you're watching
I
on
didn't say
YouTube,
warm though.
no, it's not warm, and it's not warm where I am either, but it actually is quite sunny outside where I am as well. So we're feeling lucky today, I think, with the sun. How are things going lately? You've got awesome client work you're doing. We've got lots of roundtables going on. What's been up?
It's fantastic, just always trying to keep the momentum. And I know we're going to be talking about financials and stuff like that today, but it's a habit I don't always talk, don't only talk to my clients about, but I try and live it myself. So keeping the momentum is always key to me. So it's the same, it's like Groundhog Day, but yeah, it's good. I love it.
That's awesome. And actually, we were just talking right before we started this episode about how both Roger and I are major planners. And I think planning for me and probably for you as well, and what we were talking about, I think we're feeling like that's the way to keep momentum. We got to get prepped, we got to be ready, we got to get organized. That's kind of the key to keeping things moving smoothly.
Right. Absolutely. 100% agree.
Awesome. Well, the two planners of the AC team, there are some other people that like to plan on the team, but we're definitely
Right.
the planning focused ones for sure. We're going to be coming at you today with an episode all about the power of knowing your numbers. And this isn't going to be an episode where we just talk about like, oh, it's really important to know your numbers. We all know that. We're all aware. We're actually going to be talking a little bit more, Roger. I'm going to be asking you some questions just about the work that you do specifically with clients who are looking to get a better understanding of their business and how they're leveraging those numbers, how they're leveraging their financials, their metrics, those key data points to actually help improve their business and get just even more confidence in their business. Like it covers so many things beyond just knowing numbers and all of a sudden things go well. There's a whole bunch that goes into it, and I'm going to kind of ask you to walk maybe us through a couple examples of what you do with some of your clients that you work with. And you are definitely, I think that goes with the planning topic. Actually, we're planners, and you are very, very on top of your spreadsheets, or spreadies, as Stephen would say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Stephen would go nuts if you hear the word
If I
spready.
said spreadsheet, yeah. They're like spready, spready. That's right.
Taboo, taboo. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so funny. Awesome. Well, I am excited to learn from you today. I feel like every single time we do episodes together, I learn so much. Every time we're on team calls together, you just have so much wisdom to share, especially in that finance, that knowing your numbers, that growing your business through metrics and data way. I am really curious. When you work with a client, you kind of talked about how tackling financials and numbers and just knowing where a business is at is like the very, very first thing. Like that's the priority. And when it comes to, creating that plan and going through and really working through lots of other goals, of course, but knowing knowing that information is so key. So I want to know why is that the case? Like, why have you always kind of gone back to that? And I get reminded all the time with you. I'm like, yeah, I totally do need to go back to that and really set that up first. That like help builds the foundation. But I kind of want to know through your experience in franchising and business, like, why is that the thing you always go back to and tackle with clients first?
Okay. I mean, it's a perfect way to start this topic off, Belle, because it's very appropriate in the sense that I like to frame it for the understanding of people who are maybe not comfortable with their financial or even the approach to financial. And for me, the approach always comes first.
Mm,
It's you'll probably heard the phrase before about financial health. And what we do at AC Inc. is, we try to help our clients. So it's really a diagnostic. So I'll use the analogy of, your own personal health. If I go to a doctor,
mm,
right, and I say, I want to understand my health, what the doctor will look at is, really three components, right? It's like, how are you feeling now? How was your baseline in the past?
mm,
And we can do to help you going forward in the future. So now we go back to the diagnostic of financial health. I take that same approach. I want to know where my client is today,
mm.
where they're coming from, to be able to help them and trend for the future. So that's what we talk about financial health. Now, the reason I do that, and many other practitioners do that, is because it gives insight into, performance, like health wise. Now we're talking financial health, right? Performance, operation, and the cash flow of the business. And, you may have heard across the board too that cash flow is the blood of the business. You don't have it, you're not surviving, right? So again, it's key to financial health, right? Now, the statements that we look at talk about, we look at the revenue and expenses, profitability and debt and those kinds of things. There are all, indicators again into that, analogy of health and typically financial health. Now, for me, that when you say I always start with a client, it's important to consider, like I said, those three aspects: historically, current, and the trends, because it tells me so much about the capability of the business, of
Mhm.
what they're achieving and what they want to achieve, and how to meet the objectives and how we need to adjust to trend and achieve anything they're going to want to achieve in the future, because we know what their baseline, or you'll hear others say benchmarks are for the future. And lastly, like, it's a tool that not only we use, but like C-level executives, investors, financiers are going to really analyze, the business health to be able to invest, lend, and also grow performance. And it really ties into everything in the business that you do, whether it's, operational or, otherwise, like financial needs of the business that you want to tap into as well. So that's sort of an overview why, I really dive into it that way.
Oh my gosh, Roger, well, first of all, I can tell you prepped because you have a freaking analogy that's amazing.
I
um,
live it, Val. That's yeah.
that is so, I think that helped me picture that so much better. And you're so right. Like, I think sometimes when we use examples like that to explain, because it's not a crazy thing to think that if we look back at where a business has been, where they're at now, we can kind of help project and help understand what the capabilities are in the future. Like, that doesn't seem that crazy thing, but even just hearing it in the way of that you were explaining in terms of physical health, the same way, it's the same thing. Like, we're doing the same thing across the board. I think that just also put in perspective for me how necessary it is, right? Like, if you never go get a checkup and you never establish a baseline for how healthy you are as a human, like, that transfers back to the financials. Like, you wouldn't be very set up. You're not going to know really what to do to optimize your health moving forward, eliminate chances of sickness, or all those kinds of things. It's the exact same with financials. If we never go and get a checkup, if we never check in on that health, like, we're setting ourselves up for failure, really, because we're not going to have any of that baseline stuff. We're not going to be able to look back on any of the information, and we're not going to be establishing the steps to kind of move forward in the best way. So I really love that example. I think that's so, so key. When it comes
Absolutely.
to the work you do with clients, are people into checking in on financials? And I love your thought on, like, the approach to financials is a big part of this, like your mindset around it, how you think about it. Do you find that has to be kind of worked on first? Like, do we have to kind of go through why this is important? Like, do you ever get any pushback? I know that every once in a while, if I haven't looked at my, financial statements, I get a little stressed and I'm like, okay, I really
Right.
need to look at it. Although, let's be real, I love a financial statement. You can hear it in my voice.
Right.
But
Yeah, I mean, for me, it is an exciting thing, because you find out many things, and a lot of times people find out they're healthier than they think, right?
oh,
But
interesting.
it's also a very sensitive topic, right? It's like you go into the doctor, you don't want to hear, from the diagnostic, I'm not as healthy as I think I was. So it can be very sensitive.
Yeah.
My starting point is always, we're not going to take a micro approach. So we're not going to start with surgery. We're going to start with like the holistic things. And if they don't want to dive into their numbers, you know what, just starting with an overview. So it's not, um, too confounding or too cumbersome that, they're looking at all these numbers and they don't understand why. So we always start with the macro approach and say, okay, how is your general health?
Mhm.
Let's talk about that first. And then we start to zone in and say, okay, again, it's a diagnostic. Like if you go to your doctor, okay, we find a pain point. Let's look at this a little closer. And, we all, at AC, I think we always talk about pain points. And then we start to dig in. So I'll sort of take it a little off track, but you'll see how health means everything to financial. So
Mhm.
let's say we find out like labor costs are super high. Well, you may think this is an operational thing, but it's also a financial thing. So they're linked together with the health of the business. So we're saying now we start to zone into that pain point and say, okay, your financial health is tied to your labor, which is operations. Let's start to get into the micro of that and go from there. So once the client starts to understand these things, then they start to understand of why we need to do that diagnostics to be able to free up capital and cash flow, because again, cash flow is the blood, to be able to get to whatever goals they want to in the future. So once they
Yeah.
start to understand that, they're good.
And that's so key too. And we see this a lot when we're helping field coaches communicate effectively about financials, statements, digging into numbers with franchisees, right? It's the not viewing numbers as this big, scary thing. And, even when there's initial training, franchisees often haven't, maybe they don't fully understand their P&L right off the bat and they kind of need a little bit of extra coaching on that. Or maybe they haven't been keeping up as much on their bookkeeping or whatever that looks like. I think I like your vote of confidence that sometimes you look at them and you're actually a lot healthier than you think you are. And then, as you said, you actually then have the tools to go after the goals that you have for your business, for your life. And I think that's really, really important to remember. Like these numbers are actually, they're just numbers. And the whole focus is so that we can improve the business, improve the operations, improve the sales, so that we can grow the business, work less in the business, maybe. Like it goes after these bigger, more life goals or business goals rather than it be just about the numbers, if that makes sense. Which I really,
Right.
really think is important to touch on. I want to give our listeners some tangible takeaways in terms of reviewing numbers. And when we're talking about effectively doing that diagnostic and looking at those numbers in your business, what are some just tips or advice that you would give? Like you've done this with lots of franchisees, franchisors, business owners in general. What are some tips and advice for how you would recommend doing it in a way that works? Like in a way that is truly going to kind of be helpful. I think first off, my key takeaway from something you said earlier would be thinking about the approach of it rather than just going, okay, let's look at your numbers. Like it is a sensitive topic and some people have maybe some different feelings around it. So really taking a more sensitive approach. I know that's a big takeaway for me in already what you've said, but if there are some other things maybe that would be helpful to share in terms of going over numbers in a way that's going to work really well.
Right. So there's a couple things that come to mind, like when I'm coaching or advising somebody on, how to look at their financial. And I mean, I always take it from a standpoint of it not being an overwhelming task, right? So the first thing for me is like plan, 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 plan. You have to know where you want to get to be able to make the numbers be effective or look effective of what you're trying to analyze. So plan, where do you want to go? Like, where do you want to go with your health? Do you want to lose 10 pounds? Do you want to lose 20 pounds? Like, so you have to plan for that first. And now let's take a snapshot of where you are now. The next question to that would be like your point right now is how do I do that? Right? I'll always start with the macro. Take it simple. So again, cash flow planning is huge. And when I say start with the macro, start with the big items, the big line items, the top line item, which they call revenue, and the bottom line item, expenses and gross profit or loss. When you start with those simple things, you start to see trends. Like, okay, is there any dips in revenue? Is there cycles that happen in your business? And this is just coming from like two line items. But
Yeah.
once you start to see that, you can see if you're on track or off track. Now,
Mm,
as you get more comfortable, then you start to add things into that and say, okay, well, now I can add in labor cost, of cost of goods sold, and those types of things. And then you start to become more comfortable with it. But I mean, the big thing is being able to see trends and really being able to analyze if and when you're falling off track so you can keep on track with your goal and really again about the health of your business. The last part of that I'll say is consistency, and as a planner, consistency in reviewing on a consistent basis that will give you the ability to identify problems in a timely manner. You don't want to have a problem happen in February, let's say, and then you're analyzing you say, oh, I have the time in June, and you're way off track.
Mhm.
So consistency and timing in, identifying these things to keep on track with your planning is key. So
Oh
yeah,
my gosh, that's so valuable. There's like three super big tangibles right there. Last question I have, and this is mostly just a curiosity. So, um, when it comes to how you're looking at these numbers, is this just looking at kind of your statements that out of your system, maybe you use a accounting system if I'm a franchisee, maybe I use one that's provided as a preferred vendor, or maybe I have my own that I've been looking at. Do you recommend spreadsheets, just like a simple Google sheet? Like, how do you kind of recommend starting to look at it or starting to map it out, just using the tools that are already available to you? Is there like spreadsheets that people can kind of put together that make the most sense? Obviously, it'd be awesome if we could all have you just, help us with it because you make the most amazing spreadsheets. But I'm curious in terms of like looking at these numbers, what's the best way to kind of do that? Is it just using, again, those tools that are available?
right. So, I mean, as a business owner, you probably do have some sort of tool that you're using, like QuickBooks or something similar. Again, for me, it's really diving into those lines
Mhm.
because they will pull out those lines for itself. Spreadies are good too. I love a good spreadie. And again, if you're from whatever system you're using, and sometimes a lot of these businesses have customized systems, is
Mm,
mainly to become familiar with your line items.
okay.
Now, the other part of it is if you have franchisees, you want to make sure that these line items are consistent, that you're not categorizing differently, across different units and across your head office, so you're able to analyze appropriately. And I'll always say to that is garbage in, garbage out. So you can put in a line item as, let's say weight, and I'll put it in as, heart health. And we're trying to analyze the same thing as like how healthy are we, but we're looking at two different metrics.
Mm,
So being able to have apples to apples and consistency in putting in and really becoming familiar with the tools that you already have in place as a business owner.
yeah.
Again, it's not to overwhelm yourself. Start with the big line items and then go from there. And lastly, I'll say to that, the two things I would say, like, to not overwhelm is cash flow statements and profit and loss. Those are the two big things you want to look at when you talk about balance sheets and some of those other things that, probably you want to have an accountant look at unless you're really comfortable. Start with the other two first and get comfortable with that.
Oh my gosh, Roger, I love these chats. I've already taken away so many. I'm actually taking notes as we're chatting here because this is all so valuable. I absolutely love going over this kind of stuff with you. Unfortunately, we do have to finish up today. But I am so excited to put this episode out. I think it's going to be super valuable from that coaching perspective, from the business owner perspective. I'm really excited for people to get a hold of this. Thank you so much for coming on the Franchise Growth Pod today.
No, love it anytime, Belle. It's always good hanging out with you. And, last thing I'll say about it is stay healthy.
Stay healthy. Oh my gosh, cute. I love a financial tagline. Awesome. Thank you so much for all of you who are listening. We so appreciate all of the listeners to the Franchise Growth Pod. If you haven't yet, please do leave us a rating and review wherever you stream your podcast. Helps us so much with getting the podcast out to more and more franchise folks. If you have not joined the AC Roundtable community yet, we have two free roundtables, the established franchisor and the emerging franchisor, that you can join weekly. We've been running them for 3 years. They're peer-to-peer, they're collaborative. Roger and I are on a lot of them, so you can come hang out with us. And you can get all the details for that and actually get your spot at either one at angelacote.com/roundtables. So thank you all so much for listening and go be awesome.